Okay, hello everyone. Welcome back. Josh Weber here, co-founder and CEO of Big Red Jelly. We are continuing our journey through the Big Red Jelly proven process, right? At a high level, brand build grow. Right now, we're still in the brand phase, and we are in chapter 8 of the brand phase, which is brand IP. And just to put that in context, we've now talked about visual identity, which is the fun part of brand. Now we're moving into brand IP, and going next up in the brand proven process is execution and assets. And if I'm being honest here, brand IP is something that is often forgotten by a lot of small to mid-sized business owners. It's not the funnest chapter. It's not the most exciting, especially following brand visual identity, which is what we all think about when we think of branding, right? Logo design, colors, fonts, typography, graphics, the visual aesthetic. This is the juxtaposition to that very exciting chapter. But I would argue that brand IP is one of the most important chapters. I probably say that about every chapter, but it is important. I'm going to explain why. So, what is brand IP, right? Brand intellectual property. If you have a great brand that is unique and it's differentiated and you've put in all of this hard work, but then you don't spend the time and the effort and the investment to book that digital space online, you could get into some big trouble, right? You've probably heard of a small business or an entrepreneur who went through the trouble. I know I have, who went through the trouble of doing brand naming. They've come up with a brand name. They've got a logo designed. They've even got their assets created. They've got truck wraps. They've got merch. They've got flyers. They've got trade show material. And then they go and find out that they don't have the domain that they were thinking about, right? Or .com is not available. Josh's burger shop is no longer available .com, right? So then they have to go with .biz. Or worse yet, they go and do a domain search and there's actually a competitor in the space that has the exact same name. So you could get into some legal trouble. You could end up creating a lot of brand visual identity collateral that then you can't use. And so it's really imperative that you pause for a second and you ask yourself, okay, what's my company name? What's my brand name? Do I have that all booked and registered and reserved online? This is why that's one of the first questions that we ask in brand discovery. Yes, we execute on a lot of it later, but we make sure that we reserve those domains and those social media handles early in the process when we're doing our naming research, et cetera, et cetera. The other key point I want to make sure I cover is it's not just about the singular domain, right? So for example, when I started Big Red Jelly 8.5 years ago, I made sure that bigredjelly.com was available, but I also made sure that I registered on GoDaddy, bigredjelly.biz, bigredjelly.co, bigredjelly.net, bigredjelly.io. In my opinion, depending on what your goals and vision are as a brand and company, it's worth reserving those domains. And then you can very simply repoint them or forward them to your main domain, right? That does two things. I mean, number one, it just continues to add to your brand equity library. But then number two, it makes sure that none of your competitors or any other fishy behavior is happening around your brand. You can take that a step further, by the way. For example, Nike.com belongs to Nike, but they also own JustDoIt.com, right? So you can start to think about what are the taglines or the future brand campaigns that I might run as an organization and reserve that space. Imagine if Nike did not own JustDoIt.com, right? That would be strange. What if it was some 15-year-old kid who reserved that 20 years ago? Good for him, right? But you need to reserve your digital space. So again, start with your domain. Next, move into social media handles, which in today's world are arguably just as important as your domain name. And so those two things in particular, you want to make sure you have on lockdown. And then finally, number three, again, consider what are your taglines, what are your slogans, what are potential future roll out brands, sub-services, departments, sub-brands that you might launch, and you probably want to look into getting those domains. Now, if you're a small business owner or an entrepreneur, I get this question a lot. Josh, how much should I spend on a domain, right? I think this all comes back to the naming of your brand. If it's a very vague, generic name, right, bobsburgers.com, it's probably not going to be available. And if it is, it's going to be very, very, very expensive. So it starts with the name. And that bleeds into what we talked about before with positioning, where you want to be unique, you want to be different. There's different strategies there, so I don't want to get into naming too much right now. But domains for small business owners and entrepreneurs really should not be too expensive. So it might be one of the first things you explore that might guide how you name your brand, product, or service, right? In my experience, if I'm working with a very small company, a small startup, maybe you're a solopreneur, domains should be inexpensive, right? If you go to GoDaddy.com, there's other registrars as well. You really shouldn't be spending more than $10, $20, $50 a month, maybe, right? Even that's extreme. Most domains, if they're pretty unique, you might be spending $20 a year, right? So they shouldn't be too expensive. Now let's take this a little bit further. Once you get your domain, I see this happen a lot with small business owners. They'll get their domain, they've registered their domain, they even have a website, right? joshusplumbing.com. But then they still use an email that's not connected to the domain. So I scroll to the footer of that website and I see joshesplumbing@yahoo.com or yahoomail.com or @gmail.com. What does that do, right? We kind of have this visceral reaction to that where we see that, and I think illegitimacy, I don't know if that's really their email. If you send me an email, it's @gmail.com, @outlook.com, right, @yahoo.com. It I'm skeptical. But as soon as I see your domain as the @ or after the @ it adds that level of legitimacy. There's very simple steps to do that, depending on if you're using Gmail or Outlook as your mail server, but I highly recommend that you do that, right? I even see it on business cards, and it just pains me when I see business cards and it's Josh's Plumbing 1246 @gmail.com, and that's on a business card, right? No bueno. So let me dive a little bit deeper into exactly what we do in the brand IP chapter here at Big Red Jelly. And you can ask yourself, are you doing these things, right, as you scale your company? So the first thing we do is we have what's called an online tool map in our client blueprint, right? And that's the first thing we do is we identify, okay, are we good with all of the online tools that we need for this brand to succeed? The domain, is the email branded correctly with that domain? Social media handles. Do we have other domains or alternative domains that we might use in the future? And are we redirecting those to the main domain, right? So getting that online tool map, actually drawing it out and saying, have we booked our space in the digital sphere so our brand has the footprint that it needs, right? So that's number one. Number two is we do the alternative domain research, right? So we go and explore what are the potential campaigns or alternative domains that we need to register without being over the top, right? You don't need to go book every single domain alternative that we have. But for example, in Big Red Jelly, we have bigredjelly.com. We also went and got littleredjelly.com. So we kind of had fun with it. Social media handle research. There are some tools online. There's several free tools that you can go in. I think one's called namechecker.com, but checker is missing an E. And you can type in your name and it will just really quickly show you if the domain's available and then which social media handles are available. And when I say social media, it's way more than just the obvious ones like Meta and YouTube and TikTok. Think Reddit, Quora, Medium, Tumblr. You know, there's so many social media places. And this is a suggestion that I always give to small business owners too. They'll say, well, Josh, I don't think I'm ever going to use LinkedIn. I don't think I'm ever going to use Reddit. I say, look, go and sign up anyway. Go and create a company page. Go and get that handle, customize your handle. Even if you never use it, it does two things. Number one, again, it reserves that space so your competitors don't go get it. And then number two, you might use it in the future. And so you have that reserved for future use. And number three, it is just free exposure in a marketplace where there are hundreds of thousands, if not millions of people, right? So setting up those profiles, putting your logo and your brand on there, adding a company description, and making sure that your handle is your company name if possible. So social media handle research. We also do brand campaign domain research, like I mentioned with justdoit.com. And then finally, for bigger brands, bigger companies, it's important to ask yourself, should I trademark my brand, right? Should I copyright my brand? That's a whole other topic. And usually when I encounter those sorts of brands, usually they're bigger companies. I think that small businesses don't have to worry about that as much. But if it's something that you're considering, that's where I just recommend talking to an expert, right? And so we have a network here at Big Red Jelly of trademark attorneys and copyright experts, so that you can protect yourself legally. And so that is something for you to consider, especially if you're in a space and you have a name that is more generic. Those are harder to trademark than if you have a really unique name or a really unique product or service. There's a lot of legal minutia. And so I do recommend maybe having a sit down with someone in your network if you do know a trademark expert or an attorney. It's something to certainly look into. So again, you can see why this chapter isn't the most fun thing to do, but it is, I think, one of the most important. You want to avoid that mistake of creating a brand and growing a brand and then realizing that you haven't put in the work to reserve that digital footprint so that you can protect yourself and that you can grow and scale while sleeping soundly at night. So I hope this was helpful. Brand IP. Tune in next time as we get into execution and assets, which is where the brand really starts to grow momentum. Rubber hits the road. It's time to activate, roll out, and leverage your brand so that you can grow in your sales, marketing, and advertising. Okay, good luck.